I think I can say without any fear of contradiction that the DeepCool Tristellar is the most bizarre and unusual PC case I have seen in my entire life. And yes, I am thinking of certain in-wing tubular chassis and also their mechanised bizarro roboty opens up type of case, because that's more like a machine than anything. As PC cases go, this takes the biscuit. It takes the prize. This is a mini ITX chassis that weighs in the territory of 16 to 17 kilos, and it's based around these three, they call them cabins, but three lobes. And there's this sort of central spine which allows you to pass cables through from one section to another. So I must confess, I look at it and I'm thinking of that Mitsubishi, the car manufacturer logo. Mitsubishi stands for 3 diamonds, as I recall. So this is 3 stars. What we have is, we have at the top the graphic, whoops, there goes the thumb screw. 3 cabins. The top one is for your graphics card. Slide that away. Hefty chunk of aluminium. And there we have the main housing. In here we have a PCI Express connector which attaches to a sort of a riser type of card, so it will connect to the motherboard. Take off 2 more thumb screws, slide this away. I have to lift it up. Horrible noise, horrible noise. And put that over there. And then the same again on this side. 2 more thumb screws. Oh, what a horrible noise. And take away that hefty grey aluminium housing there. Right, and then what we have is the stripped down chassis. So, graphics card in the top, motherboard goes there, motherboard actually goes there, I/O panel here, power supply goes here, and then you feed cables through to connect them together, like so. On the front we have what looks like a relatively conventional I/O panel, headset jacks, pair of USB 3 ports. That there is the power button, and that tiny little thing up there, that's the reset button. You do have the option of installing an optical drive in, I think it's this side. I'm gonna have to check actually. I think the optical drive goes in this side, and then hard drives can go in that side, and you've got bays for 2 3.5 drives and 3 2.5 drives. You'll notice up here we've got drive caddies. DeepCool has actually very recently announced they have a version of this case where the top cabin, the graphics cabin, will be made, instead of made in aluminium, it's going to be some sort of clear plastic, so it'll all be on show, which actually sounds quite funky. I quite like the idea of that. One other thing worthy of note before we get further into this: in the box of accessories, in this box, packed in very tightly actually, is a drive caddy. There we go, which goes in, make sure I get this side, goes in here at the front. This rail removes, the caddy goes in. You can, once you have the motherboard, mini ITX motherboard mounted here, leaving the front empty, you can, if you choose, actually put a 120 liquid cooling system on those mounts instead of putting the drive caddy in. So you can have your motherboard there and your liquid cooler there, which strikes me as quite interesting. The only installed fan is that fella there in the top graphics card cabin. So you have got all the usual bits and pieces, but in no way, shape or form are they in the usual places. Motherboard down there, connects to graphics card up here, power supply there, optical drive, hard drives, cooling. As I say, all the usual parts, but the layout and the organisation is completely unique. So there we go, let's get on with the build. Goodness me, did I really say that the casings for the 3 cabinets or cabins were made of aluminium? In actual fact, they're magnetic steel. Quite why DeepCool's chosen to use 2mm steel is beyond me. These are hefty bits of metalwork, And the thing is that steel, while it's relatively easy to work with, it's solid, it's resilient, it's quite cheap. On the other hand, it doesn't dissipate heat so well. You'd think that an aluminium case or covering for the case would have made sense. Anyway, steel it is. I was wrong. So the construction of the chassis is steel, the framework is steel, the main cabins are steel, these front panels are plastic. You can, if you really want to, pull them off, although there's absolutely no need to do so apart from when you're monkeying around with the optical drive bay. But if we put that to one side, steel throughout, plastic front, and there we go. So building the PC, not especially difficult. Although many small form factors can be quite fiddly, and there is a degree of fiddle with this, it all works pretty well. You have to put your power supply in first. I've gone for a Seasonic 520 watt platinum fanless, which is there. It's a conventional modular ATX, except it doesn't have a fan in it. Other than that, in terms of size and function, it's dead conventional. Goes there. You will note there is almost no space in front of the power supply for the cabling between the drive base and the power supply. So a bigger power supply isn't really an option unless you decide to fillet the case and take out your drive base. Although it would be possible if you really wanted to put a monster power supply in. No real need. One graphics card, obviously single processor. You're not going to run SLR or Crossfire in this thing, so what's the point in having a 1000 watt power supply? So the power supply there, then you feed through the main power connectors to the opposite side. You feed the graphics connectors up to the top, and you're pretty much good to go. Then it's a case of plug and plug. There's a sort of degree of fiddle with the little riser ribbon that comes from the motherboard through to the graphics card, but it's not the end of the world. And as you can see, we have here a Sapphire R9 290 Trix graphics card that fills the top cabin quite neatly. But there is still a little bit of space to spare. And then on the back, we have these 3 2.5 inch drive bays. So there is a lot going on with this case. It's a small form factor in the sense it's mini ITX, but it's a fully configured gaming PC. The Asus Z97i Pro Mini ITX motherboard has a Core i7 processor on it, and I've gone for an Alpenphone VAS 120mm liquid cooler. That's a conventional Ace-Tech piece of hardware. Now, I cannot claim that this looks pretty because it doesn't. All the various bits of cabling that feed through that go to the motherboard headers for front panel connectors, USB 2, USB 3, audio, and so on, they go through there okay. And then, of course, you've got the power supply cable there. You can probably just about see it goes to the main connector. That all works reasonably well. And then you've got the liquid cooling hoses going off to the all-in-one there. It's a bit of a bag of bits. Obviously, once the cabin cover is on, it's all completely concealed, not a problem. But it's fairly evident that it's not really great for airflow. I mean, how can it be? Having said that, it does get in there, it does work. You haven't got anything too extraordinary to do your assembly. One thing that did cause me a certain amount of heartache is there are these 3 2.5 inch bays at the top and 2 3.5 inch bays there. So huge amounts of capacity or ability to put your storage in, but what it means is that DeepCool has kindly pre-wired the bays, so you've got 5 SATA cables and 5 power connectors. As it happens, Molex connectors, albeit they become SATA connectors, which you need to hook up around here and also on your motherboard. That's fine, but it unfortunately they haven't labelled the connectors, so you don't know which SATA cable goes to which drive bay. So really the only option you've got is just to plug the whole caboose in and hope it works. Anyway, that works well enough. So you end up with a fully configured gaming PC. Obviously, the form factor is a bit bizarre, no two ways about it. It also doesn't help that you may have heard the noises when I was doing the initial sort of exploratory video, when I was taking the cabins on and off and there's some graunching and grinding. The way to basically open and close your PC is to tip it up on its front, stand it up, and then the cabins lift on and off quite easily. It's still, they're heavy, but that way they're not kind of being sprung together by the weight of the chassis. So they lift on and off fairly easily, but it does make it a little awkward working with the PC. But, you know, realistically, you're going to build it the once, you might be in and out of it on occasion. But once you've done all that, it's all well and good. One actual problem I had during the build is there's a single fan here, 90 or 92mm fan, and the header goes all the way down here to here. But it won't reach the motherboard, or won't reach this particular motherboard, because the fan headers are all on this side of the motherboard. They are as far away from the fan as you're going to get. And I tried routing the cable slightly differently, and I just couldn't do it. So that's slightly vexing. The graphics card actually maintained its coolness to a reasonable degree, so the fact that fan wasn't helping was not ideal, I'm sure of that. It wasn't the end of the world either. But that strikes me as a little bit silly, because another couple of centimetres of cable and I'd have been golden. As it was, no joy. So one actual snag there. Other things that are inherent to it, this business of lack of space and so on, well, yeah, that's because it's a small PC. Of course, there's nothing to say I had to use a Core i7. In fact, there's nothing to say I had to use a liquid cooler. I could have used, say, a Pentium Anniversary and then gone for a low-profile air cooler. That would be an entirely acceptable thing to do. On a Core i7, you have to use a liquid cooler. In fact, I'd say on a proper Core i5, you're pretty much obliged to, because low-profile air coolers only work to a certain extent. But having gone down this route, which is full-fat graphics card, proper processor, liquid cooler therefore becomes essential, and here we are. The PC works well. Cooling obviously is always going to be an issue when you've got restricted airflow, but despite that, the fan's all cranked up, or rather the fan, because essentially the only fan in it is on the liquid cooler. It kept it under control to a reasonable degree. The CPU hit 67 Celsius under load, which is 10 to 20 degrees hotter than a conventional chassis. So that's not great. The GPU hit 86, which is 10 degrees hotter than I would like to see, and that's not great either. But in a small form factor, it's entirely understandable. And I have gone for, and this was like using Thermark and Prime or Ada 64. In other words, I was stressing the components mercilessly. So those are worst case scenarios. Put it another way around, it survived the experience, and that has to be a good thing. The one thing I would say is that as the fans on the graphics card and also on the liquid cooler spun up, there was a definite wind tunnel effect. You could hear the air being drawn through the cabins. Incidentally, the liquid cooler fan is on the underside here and is blowing out. Both of the sort of side cabins, they have these magnetic filters over these grills. Works well, and it means the air can flow, but you haven't exactly got sort of one ventilated in, one ventilated out. You've got a kind of meshy panel where air can get in. It's certainly considerably better than air merely leaking in. You have a path for air in each of the three cabins. As I say, for the graphics card, I'm sure it would have helped if that fan had been connected, but there we have it. So overall, the DeepCool GamerStorm, give me its full name, DeepCool GamerStorm Tristellar case works well. The biggest question I have over it is why? I cannot get away from a kind of a feeling of a novelty quality to it. Why would you build a case that's this triple lobe, triple cabin design? And I honestly cannot come up with a proper, sensible, rational explanation for it. There's obviously a design thing about it. There's essentially your PC falls into three sections: graphics, motherboard, and then power supply and storage, i.e. other stuff. Fair enough. We've seen one or two slightly bizarre cases in the past. The BMW designed Amtech 10 series, for example, was novel to say the least. Shrunk wrap around the components. There have been certain cases in Win with their S-frame and D-frames. Those are certainly unusual. And it seems reasonable to say they are design-led. This, I would say, is in the same category, but it hasn't gone completely bonkers. It's not like some Philips Stark type of product where it's all design and simply doesn't work. This certainly works as a PC, no two ways about it. Certain aspects of it are slightly more fiddly than you'd like, but that's the nature of small form factor PCs. The question is, do you like it? And I look at it and I'm thinking, well, it needs to be on your desk to make any sense whatsoever, in which case you need quite a lot of desk space. And my instinct is, well, it doesn't really fit in with my setup. On the other hand, you may look at it and go, it's just absolutely incredible. It's very much an aesthetic thing, and it's very much a personal choice. if you like it, if you admire the styling and the thinking behind it, then we can move on to price. And the price, as you will not be surprised to learn, is high. This is one of the early handmade samples, and it's £499 in the UK. The standard factory-made case like this is £399, and my understanding is there's actually no difference between the two, except one is coming off a sort of, you know, custom-made production line, and the other is a regular production line. The actual case, the hardware you get, is the same. Also, there is a variant on this case where the top cabin is transparent, so you can see the graphics card, and that appeals to me hugely. I like that a lot. In actual fact, I wouldn't want to see this cabin open to inspection, not a lot, because it's a bit mucky. This, on the other hand, I'm in two minds. That could work, but certainly having the top cabin open to inspection, I like the idea of that a lot. The fact you can put in 3 2.5-inch drives and 2 3.5-inch drives and a proper power supply and a proper graphics card and proper cooling in what is undeniably a very small form factor case, I think is absolutely excellent. You get a USB 3, you get headset jacks, you can put an optical drive in. The limitations are actually almost non-existent. There's that price, there's the fact that it's so blooming heavy because of these steel cabins. Maybe aluminium was simply too expensive. It's the likeliest explanation. But overall, impressed, and in a way, I found this case slightly scary to work with because it's just so out of the ordinary. But DeepCool has done a very fine job with the Tristellar. It's unfortunate it costs so much, but that's almost the nature of the beast. Overall, this case has really grown on me. It's an impressive piece of work, it's a clever piece of design, and there's some fine engineering that's gone into it. I can only apologise for the mess of that aspect of the build there, but I really didn't have a lot of say in the matter. So there we go. This is Leo Waldorf for Kit Guru. This is the DeepCool Gamer Storm Tristellar Mini ITX case.